the Congresswoman from the 5th District of Oklahoma. We're talking immigration and health care. Next, it's Mitchell Talks the News 9 Sessions with Aaron Brill. Our guest this morning, 5th District Congresswoman. Two things that I'd noticed about Kendra Horn. Number one is hardly anybody thought she could win except her people.
Yeah.
They thought she was going to win. She won. And the second thing is she won't be able to win again. But, we'll talk about that a little later. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, too.
Have you always been underestimated?
I think that is a fairly good way to describe it. And I think you're right. Not many people, especially nationally, expected us to be able to win. But the thing I tell everybody is that this was an Oklahoma decision, an Oklahoma victory for the people of Oklahoma's 5th Congressional District. Because I'm here to serve every single person, regardless of their background, regardless of what party they are. And that's how we got here. A lot of hard work, listening to constituents and asking them what mattered to them, and that's what I'm doing every day. We're reaching out into the community, myself and all my staff, to make sure that we're actually addressing the issues. It's easy to get confused by all the noise on the national level, but the real work has to be done here.
After you moved in and settled into your office, what surprised you most?
The thing that surprised me the most is the difference between what you see at the national level in the national news and maybe on your social media feeds and what the reality of the people I get to work with every day are. That most of us are somewhere a little bit closer to the middle, and you might think that there's only about 3 new people in this class, but there are a lot of really good people up there that are doing work for the right reasons. There are people that are on the extremes, but for the most part, I get to work with some really dedicated people. We don't all have to agree on everything, but there's some really good people, and we get to work together. And that's truly a reward to be able to serve the community, whether it's in Oklahoma's delegation or on my side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle across the country. We've been able to do a lot of good work, I think.
Let's talk about your district,
Yep.
and we'll get around to re-election here in a little bit. But there's no absolutes in politics. I'm so old, I can remember even before there was electricity. But I do know this: people that do district work get re-elected time and time again, who do the work at home. Incredible to me. You had this town hall this week, and insulin came up.
Yes.
Healthcare issues are going to be really, really big later in the Oklahoma legislative session 2020, right? It's going to be a big issue. Is the media spending enough time on healthcare issues? I mean, really getting into the weeds on it?
No, I don't think so. And I think the problem is we're kind of distracted by these big proposals that people are arguing back and forth about, when the truth is there are some things that there's a lot of bipartisan agreement on, and then there's many things that we can do to actually help people right now. And that's why I like to focus on. That town hall we had, I had a study commissioned through the office about the cost of insulin, because we've had, as you said, so many people coming to us and telling us about their problems, their stories about not being able to afford insulin, about the cost. And what we found in that study is there are 22,000 Oklahomans in the 5th District that are on Medicare that have type 2 diabetes, or that have diabetes. And the cost of insulin has risen astronomically, in some cases thousands of percents. Yeah. And that has meant that we've had individuals here rationing insulin. It means that people have died because they can't afford it. But it also has another cost. It has a human cost, but it also has a cost on the other side, where it costs Medicare and Medicaid and all of us more to treat the consequences of not having these life-saving medications. It's billions of dollars each year that we're spending because we're not doing anything to control the cost of these life-saving medications and to hold people accountable.
Did the study show why insulin is getting so expensive? Not just insulin, it's so many medications getting so expensive?
The why wasn't necessarily answered, but the interesting thing it did show is that as one company raised the price of insulin, the other companies raised the price of insulin. And right now, Medicare is not able to negotiate drug pricing. And we have very few restrictions, if any, on drug pricing and how we can control that. We certainly need for the pharmaceutical companies to be able to do the research to help figure out what's the next generation so we can save more lives. And that takes money. But at the same time, in other countries, we are paying like 90% more than other countries for the cost of insulin and other drugs, because we're not putting any controls on it. We're not allowing Medicare to control it. And in the case of insulin, there are no generics, which is something that we're going to begin to work on as well.
Speaking of medications, we're in the midst of an opioid crisis.
Yes.
You've been following the opioid
Absolutely.
trial. You see what Johnson & Johnson is saying, and
Yep.
their point is a valid point. Essentially what they're saying is they're not responsible for the opioid crisis. Doctors were overprescribing opioids. Doctors should have known that opioids are addictive. From what you've seen, is Johnson & Johnson to blame, or is it deeper than that?
Well, I think that specific case is going to have to work its way through the court system, and we'll see what the decision is. But I think the broader problem is doctors should have known is problematic when they're being told by drug companies that don't worry, this is not addictive, when they in fact know that it is addictive.
Sure.
And so there's a problem. Doctors can't know everything, but also if the drug companies are saying it's not addictive and then we're pushing it out there and pushing these prescriptions, then there is some responsibility on the drug companies' part for this opioid crisis. And we have to fix it. Addiction and mental health are two of the most critical issues that we're facing today, and I've been spending a lot of time on those issues as well. We have been working on getting more access to mental health services here and training for people like first responders and police to learn to recognize and de-escalate mental health. But the broader problem of addiction treatment and mental health services is that in Oklahoma, less than 1 in 3 people who need ongoing mental health services can get access to them. So we've got a real crisis on our hands, and when we're talking about healthcare, we can't leave out mental health. We can't leave out addiction. And we've got to be able to address all of those things to treat the whole person, because I don't know anybody whose brain is separate from their body.
Mental health care is health care.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to stop separating them out. And if we get people access to care and ongoing treatment, they can be stable, they can be productive. But right now, we've got a problem in Oklahoma and across the country with criminal justice reform. We've been putting people into our jails and prisons that have addiction issues, that have issues with mental health. We've got to treat those underlying symptoms, those underlying causes, not just the symptoms.
You talked about these broad brush fixes, and a lot of folks who need opioids because of pain management are arguing, well, now we can't get them because the pendulum has swung too far. Has it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a problem, right? It's if we go to all or nothing, that's the problem with all or nothing. We went from being able to prescribe a lot of opioids, and here in the state, talking to some healthcare providers, if they've got patients whose mobility is limited, who can't get out, only a week's supply that is monitored closely by a doctor makes it very challenging. So we've got to find that balance, including allowing our insurance companies and providers to look at other potential ways to address pain. There's a lot of ways to do that, and we've got to make sure that there's a suite of options that is informed by medicine, that is informed by science, and that also watches out for addiction and looks at all of those pieces. And the last piece of this is I just had an amendment, passed an amendment in the Defense Appropriations Bill that would provide grant funding for police and first responders to learn to recognize and de-escalate when somebody is in mental health crisis. Because 1 in 4 individuals who are shot by police is experiencing a mental health crisis. 1 in 3 people who has to be taken to an emergency psychiatric service, it's the police and first responders. But we're not equipping them with the knowledge and understanding to recognize and de-escalate. So this is a safety issue, and it was a bipartisan bill that I introduced with my friend Anthony Gonzalez, a Republican from Ohio, in the House side, and that Senator Inhofe and Senator Sherrod Brown introduced on the Senate side, and we've gotten that in there because we have to hit this from all of these different angles to make sure that we have the people that are encountering these situations, they know how to deal with it, and then on the other side, we were able to reauthorize funding for critical mental health services for people who otherwise can't afford it through a program here that Oklahoma is one of the trial states, and so that's really important.
We just saw a case in Edmond where Edmond police shot and killed a young man who was having some type of an episode. We don't know what at this point. Sometimes they just don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, and trauma and mental health and addiction issues, if you've never been trained to address those, you're not necessarily going to know how. So this is about safety for our first responders, but it's also about safety and taking care of people like that young man. And this happens across the country. We worked with police, and we worked with some of the organizations that represent those individuals who are out on the front lines of responding on a regular basis, so they can get the training they need. And it's hard to know it if you don't have the proper training.
Can I ask you some behind the scenes, a couple of questions
Sure.
before we get into the politics of this? For those of us who I watch some of the cable morning programs, and we see this battle there in Washington. We see the outliers in both parties. We see the president doing what he does. What's really going on behind the scenes? All right, there's the speaker appears to have kept her coalition together, but you have a lot of people hollering for impeachment. You have some would say the president wants that to happen. Beyond the morning cable TV shows, Congresswoman, what's really going on behind the scenes in terms of the politics of the U.S. House and this president?
What I think is really happening is what you see on the cable news shows, what you see in the memes is really only the voices of the extremes on both ends of the spectrum. But what you don't see is there are a lot of us, like myself, who are actively reaching across the aisle, that of the more than 100 new members that just came in this Congress, that and in the majority especially, that there are a lot of us who consistently reach across the aisle, work on bipartisan legislation, who are trying to solve some of these issues, who don't believe that the answer is on either extreme, an all or nothing approach, and people like me who are working with colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle to fix these issues. They don't see that I have a good working relationship with the other members of the Oklahoma delegation, that the other members, including Congressman Cole and Congressman Mullen, we've worked on issues surrounding Native Americans and tribal sovereignty and important issues, Native health care, from the very beginning. They don't see the relationships that are being built, because it is one of those things that it's just easier to tell the story when it's more sensational, I think. But a lot of the work is being done by those of us in the middle. And I think take this funding that we just got passed for this emergency funding for these young people and the shelters. We all worked together. That was a strong bipartisan vote that got that through. Is that the end of the story? No. We still have to have responsibility. But on the other side of it, we passed some emergency funding measures for weather a couple of weeks ago. But what held that up, the final passage, was somebody on the extreme right not wanting to push it through, even after there was an overwhelming bipartisan vote in the House and in the Senate. And that funds needed to go to the farmers in Iowa, to the victims of flash flooding and tornadoes here in Oklahoma and other places. That's what that was for. But it's not quite as fun to look at, those of us that are just talking things through and trying to figure out, okay, you're here, I'm here, let's figure out what the solution is and how we get there. They don't see me on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee as the chair of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, working with my ranking member, Congressman Babin from Texas. They don't see us getting along and agreeing on many of the things. Do we agree on everything? No. But do you agree on everything, even with the people closest to you in your life? I don't. I've never known anybody that I agreed with 100% of the time. So they don't see the hard work that's happening and the coalitions that are being built, I think.
This past week we celebrated the nation's independence, and with that came the President's salute to America. What did you think of the speech? What did you think of the display?
Well, I think the celebration of our nation's independence means a lot of things. It is about a representative government. It is about making sure that the voices of our people are heard and making sure that everybody gets their place in the process. Now, have we always been perfect at this? No, we haven't. And certainly our nation's military has a lot to be proud of. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I have worked very hard to make sure that we are addressing some of the critical issues facing our service members. But the Independence Day celebration is about an idea that is beyond just our nation's military. It's about who we are as a people, about the fact that we're going to keep working until we get to that place where every single person is valued, and that we have to keep standing up for that. And valuing our military is absolutely important, but that is not everything about our country. And making sure we remember that there are so many things that should not be politicized, and remembering that is really critical. The work that our public servants do on a day-to-day basis, whether they are wearing a uniform or whether they are air traffic controllers. We train those air traffic controllers here, keeping us safe, or the food safety inspectors that are keeping us safe on a day-to-day basis, making sure that our food is edible and is not going to make us sick, or so many other things. Those are the things that we need to celebrate the idea of democracy, to continue to celebrate this really revolutionary thing that we did as the United States. And we still got work to do, but we've got to make sure that it is not all about politics, and it has to be broader.
I hate to bring this up, but you have to run every 2 years in the United States Congress.
I do, that is true.
We referenced this one a little bit earlier. The results of your election hadn't been 5 minutes old until there were people in this town going, well, who's going to run against Kendra Horn, right? I mean, it was just kind of a parlor game. And then the names are floated, and a lot of those names went away. That's the House of Representatives, very close to the people.
Yep.
So you're a congresswoman, but you also have to run for re-election. And I was joking earlier on, history's replete with people who couldn't win and couldn't say. In Oklahoma, Cindy Munson, House District 85, but for years people said, she'll never be reelected. She gets reelected. So we have lots of people who can't get elected and then they can't get reelected. You have to run. This is a really red state. Oklahoma City's turning purple. I noticed purple today.
Yeah.
For folks that are watching you as the congresswoman, but you also have to run a re-election campaign, your thoughts about what people will see over the next year or so, right?
Yeah. My number one priority since the very beginning, since the election, is showing up to serve the people of the 5th District, period, as much as possible. We moved our office downtown to 4th and Walker, so it's close to public transit. We're less than a block away from that bus station, but we're also close to the business community. We're a couple blocks away from City Hall. The message that we're sending is that we are here to serve. My team on the ground here is out at community events. We are here to help with anybody's issues that they're facing with federal agencies or any other things like that we can help with. And I have been meeting with people since the day after the election, actually even before that, to make sure that we understand the needs and the concerns of our community, whether it's an individual or a business or whoever it is that I'm here to advocate for and work for Oklahomans. And that's the bottom line. And so I hope that's what they see, because I think that's one of the things that got us here, and we're going to keep focusing on. It's this seat, as I see it, this is the Oklahomans' seat. It's a 5th District seat, and it belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to me. And I think public service is something that we've got to value again. We've got to encourage people to reach out to their elected officials and to be engaged in the process. And I'm always going to have an open door, and that's why we've had so many town halls and other events, so we can hear from people. And that's what we're going to keep doing from here until next November, is showing up to serve people. And I'm going to do my best, and we're going to work really hard to make sure that people know what we're doing. And I think that's how we got here. It wasn't an outside effort. I'm the only person in the United States that flipped a seat that was a Republican seat that's now a Democratic seat, that the DCCC didn't get involved in this seat, that there weren't other outside forces that were pushing it all along the way. This was an Oklahoma effort, and it will be again. We have thousands and thousands of donors from Oklahoma that have stepped up and said, we believe in what you're doing. And it's across party lines, and it's across different backgrounds. And that's what this is all about, making sure that the voices of Oklahomans are heard.
I think we just broke news. Did we just break news that she's announced a re-election campaign? Is that what
a shock.
Here?
Didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that coming.
Didn't see that coming.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Come
Good
back
to
and
be here
see
with
us
you
often,
both.
will you?
Absolutely, I'd love to. Happy to talk to you anytime. Thank you very much. And thank you for covering this important topic. It's so important that people know what's going on with their elected officials. So thank you for doing that.
And a lot of times at News 9, they'll on the news9.com, when there are hearings in Washington, they'll switch to that. Also, they got this thing called C-SPAN.
Yeah.
It's a heck of
I've
a deal.
heard of it.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
C-SPAN deal. You don't have to let the the news filter there. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank
It's
you.
great to see you again, my friend.
Good seeing you, as
And
always.
next week it's Brillback solo. We'll be sitting in for me for your vote counts on the hot seat. It's going to be
You can actually feel the ratings drop.
not really. Hey, it's great to see you. Thanks for watching us. See us again at news9.com/yourvotecounts. Monday mornings, by the way. And follow me on Twitter at Mitchell Talks.